I caught a teenager breaking into my garage, but instead of stealing my car, he was trying to fix his mom's wheelchair with my tools. The sanctuary and the violation. My garage is more than just a place to park cars. It's my sanctuary. It's a climate-controlled fortress of solitude where everything has its place. The wrenches are color-coded. The floor is epoxy-coated so clean you could eat off it. And sitting in the center under a custom cover is my 1969 Mustang Fastback. I've spent the better part of 2 decades restoring that car. It represents thousands of hours of blood, sweat, and disposable income. I'm Arthur, a retired mechanical engineer. I live alone, I like quiet, and I am fiercely protective of the things I've worked hard for. We live in a decent suburb, but lately, there had been talk on the neighborhood app about a string of car break-ins. I dismissed it as hysteria until 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. The sound that woke me wasn't a shattering window. It was subtler, the distinct creak hiss of my hydraulic garage door being forced upward just enough to slide something underneath. My heart hammered against my ribs. I didn't grab a gun, I don't own one. But I grabbed the heavy Maglite flashlight from my nightstand. Adrenaline flooded my system, washing away sleep and replacing it with cold, territorial anger. Someone was in my space. Someone was coming for my Mustang. The confrontation. I didn't turn on the lights inside the house. I moved through the hallway like a ghost in my own home, the Maglite heavy in my sweating palm. I reached the door connecting the kitchen to the garage. I could hear sounds now, not the sound of an engine hot wiring, but the metallic clink of tools hitting concrete. I took a breath, gripped the doorknob, and threw the door open, simultaneously slamming my hand onto the light switch. Fluorescent light flooded the space, blinding momentarily. "Hey, get away from the car," I bellowed, raising the flashlight like a club. I expected to see a hardened criminal, maybe 2 guys in ski masks. Instead, I saw a single figure frozen near my workbench. He looked small in the sudden light. He was wearing an oversized gray hoodie and faded jeans. He flinched violently, dropping something heavy that clattered loudly on the floor. He turned slowly, putting his hands up. It wasn't a man. It was a kid. Maybe 16, scrawny, with messy brown hair and eyes wide with terrified panic. He was shaking so hard I could see his knees knocking together. The anomaly. The adrenaline was still pumping, urging me to tackle him, to call the cops immediately. My thumb hovered over the siren button on my key fob. "Don't move," I growled, advancing slowly. "What the hell are you doing, trying to strip the Mustang?" The kid shook his head frantically, unable to speak. He looked like he was about to throw up from fear. I got closer, keeping the light trained on his face. That's when the scene started to resolve into something that didn't make sense. He wasn't near the car. He was at my primary workbench. The tools he had disturbed weren't screwdrivers for popping ignitions. They were heavy-duty socket wrenches and a specialized bearing puller. And on the bench, sitting on a clean rag, wasn't a car stereo. It was a greasy, complex metal caster assembly wrapped in a broken plastic housing. It looked like landing gear for a small aircraft, or perhaps. "I asked you a question," I said, lowering the flashlight slightly as the immediate threat of violence faded. The kid looked hungry and terrified, not dangerous. "What are you doing with my bearing puller?" The confession. The kid, I later learned his name was Leo, swallowed hard. It took him 3 tries to find his voice. I wasn't gonna steal the car, mister, I swear." His voice cracked. "I just needed the tools, your garage. The door was the easiest to jimmy, and I knew you guys had good stuff in here. I watched you working last weekend." My eyes narrowed. He'd been watching me. "What do you need a bearing puller for at 2:30 in the morning?" Leo looked at the greasy metal object on the bench. His shoulders slumped in defeat. "It's my mom's, her chair. The main caster bearing seized up yesterday. She can't move it. She's stuck in bed until it's fixed." I looked at the part again. Now it made sense. It was the front wheel assembly of a heavy-duty power wheelchair. "Why didn't you call a repair service?" I asked, hearing how stupid the question sounded as soon as I said it. Leo looked at the floor, shame burning his ears red. Medicare won't approve a replacement for 3 weeks, and the emergency tech wanted $400 just to come out after hours. We don't have $400. He looked up at me, his eyes wet. "She needs to get to her dialysis appointment tomorrow morning. If she doesn't go, she gets really sick. I tried to fix it with pliers, but the bearing is jammed tight. The engineer's pivot." The anger drained out of me, replaced by a sickening thud of realization. I was standing here in my robe, protecting a car I drove twice a month, while this kid was committing a felony to ensure his mother could get life-saving medical treatment. I looked at the part. I looked at the kid. The engineer part of my brain, which had been dormant since retirement, suddenly kicked into gear. "You were going to use the puller to get the seized bearing off the axle," I stated. It wasn't a question. Leo nodded miserably. "Yeah, I watched a YouTube video on how to do it, but I don't have the right size socket to drive the puller." I sighed, a long, deep sigh that expelled the last of my self-righteousness. I walked past him to the tool chest. He flinched again, thinking I was grabbing a weapon. I pulled out a 19 deep-well impact socket and tossed it to him. He caught it reflexively. "That's the size you need," I said. "Show me what you were going to do." Leo stared at me, completely bewildered. You're not calling the cops." "Not yet," I lied. "Fix the part. Let's see if you learned anything from YouTube." The collaboration. For the next 45 minutes, my garage wasn't a crime scene. It was a workshop. Leo was clumsy but intuitive. He understood the mechanics, but he didn't have the hand strength or the experience to know when a metal part was about to give way. I stepped in when the stubborn bearing finally shrieked and popped free from the axle. It was rusted solid and pitted beyond repair. "It's trash," I said, inspecting the race. Leo's face fell. "So I can't fix it." "Not with this bearing." I walked over to my parts bin, the junk drawer of the garage where I kept decades of leftover hardware. I dug through sealed bearings from old lawnmowers and previous car projects. Miraculously, I found a sealed industrial bearing that was almost a perfect match for the inner diameter. The outer diameter was a hair too small for the plastic housing. "We need a shim," I mumbled, more to myself than him. I grabbed a piece of aluminum flashing stock and tin snips. I cut a thin strip, curled it inside the housing, and tapped the new bearing into place. It fit snugly. I handed the reassembled caster to Leo. "It spins," I said. He spun the wheel. It was silent and smooth. The look he gave me wasn't fear anymore. It was pure, undiluted awe. "You just made that work." "It's temporary," I said gruffly. "It won't last forever, but it'll get her to dialysis." The escort. Leo clutched the repaired part to his chest like gold. "Thank you," he whispered. "I have to go put it back on before she wakes up." He turned to head toward the slightly cracked garage door he'd snuck under. "Hold it," I said. I grabbed my keys off the hook. "You aren't walking home at 3:30 in the morning carrying a heavy metal part. Where do you live?" He hesitated. "The complex on Elm." The Elm Street apartments were about a mile away. They were notorious for being run down and unsafe. "Get in the truck," I said, nodding toward my Ford F-150 parked in the driveway. "Sir, you don't have to." "Get in the truck, Leo. I need to make sure this thing actually fits the chair, don't I? My warranty expires when I leave the premises." I wasn't just checking the work. I needed to see if he was telling the truth. A cynical part of me still wondered if this was an elaborate con, though his trembling hands during the repair suggested otherwise. The reality check. We drove in silence. When we pulled into the parking lot of the apartment complex, the reality of Leo's life hit me hard. There were abandoned shopping carts near the dumpsters, and half the security lights were broken. Leo led me up 3 flights of external concrete stairs to apartment 3B. He unlocked the door quietly. The apartment smelled of stale air, bleach, and poverty. It was clean but sparse. In the living room, there was a hospital bed set up. In the bed lay a woman who looked painfully frail, her face puffy from what I assumed was kidney issues. Beside the bed sat a large, complex power wheelchair tilted precariously on blocks, missing its front left wheel. Leo hadn't lied, not about a single thing. He knelt immediately by the chair and began sliding the repaired assembly onto the mounting post. "Leo," the voice from the bed was weak and groggy. "What are you doing up?" Leo froze. "Just getting water, Mom. Go back to sleep." She shifted, her eyes opening slightly. She saw me standing awkwardly by the door in my jacket over my pajamas. Her eyes went wide with alarm. "Who is that, Leo? What's going on?" The installation and the truth. Before I could speak, Leo rushed to her side. "It's okay, Mom. This is Mr. Arthur. He helped me." I stepped forward, trying to look less like an intruder. "Evening, ma'am. Your son. He borrowed some tools from me to fix your chair. I just gave him a ride home to make sure he got the part back on straight." Sarah looked from me to Leo, then down at the chair. She saw the grease on Leo's hands. The realization dawned on her face, the fear that her son had done something desperate, mixed with overwhelming relief that the chair was whole again. "Leo," she said, her voice stern but trembling, "what did you do?" "I fixed it, Mom," he pleaded. "You have dialysis at 8 a.m. You have to go." I watched as Leo finished tightening the bolts. He lowered the heavy chair off the blocks. He sat in it and spun it around twice. It worked perfectly. Sarah started to cry, not loud sobs but silent, exhausted tears leaking out of the corners of her eyes. "Thank you," she said to me, her voice thick. "I don't know what he did to get your help, but thank you. I didn't know what we were going to do tomorrow." Seeing the sheer desperation in that room, over a $50 part that Medicare wouldn't approve, made my stomach churn. "He's a good mechanic," I said softly. "You raised a resourceful kid." The shift in perspective. I drove home in a daze. When I got back to my garage, it felt different. The air, usually crisp and satisfying, felt stagnant. I looked at my Mustang under its expensive cover. I looked at my wall of pristine tools. An hour ago, I was ready to ruin a teenager's life to protect this stuff. Now, the sheer volume of my possessions felt obscene. I had thousands of dollars of tools sitting idle while a kid a mile away was ready to break the law just to borrow one for an hour to save his mother. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat at my workbench, staring at the spot where we had fixed the bearing, replaying the look on Sarah's face. My sanctuary wasn't a fortress anymore. It felt more like a mausoleum of selfish pursuits. I knew the shim I put in that bearing wouldn't last a month. It was a Band-Aid. At 7:00 a.m., instead of making coffee, I picked up the phone. I called a medical supply company I used to do engineering consulting for. I called in a favor, a big one. The aftermath and a new project. 2 days later, a delivery van arrived at the Elm Street apartments. I was waiting in the parking lot when Leo got off the school bus. His eyes widened when he saw me leaning against my truck. He looked terrified again, probably thinking I'd changed my mind and called the cops. "Get in," I said. "Your mom is expecting us." We went upstairs. The living room looked different. The old, unreliable chair was gone. In its place sat a brand new, top-of-the-line all-terrain power wheelchair with gel cushions and reinforced caster wheels. Sarah was sitting in it, weeping openly this time. Leo dropped his backpack. He looked at the chair, then at me. "Did you?" "I know people," I said quietly. "The old one was unsafe." I turned to go, uncomfortable with the gratitude filling the room, but I stopped at the door and looked back at Leo. "Hey," I said, "I've got a '69 Fastback in my garage. I'm rebuilding the carburetor this weekend. It's a two-man job. You interested in learning how to tune a V8? Leo's jaw dropped. A slow, genuine grin spread across his face, the smile of a regular 16-year-old kid, not a desperate caregiver. "Yeah," he said, "yeah, I am." The value of tools. I've spent my life collecting tools. I have tools to measure tolerances within a thousandth of an inch, and tools to apply hundreds of pounds of torque. I always thought their value lay in what they could build or fix: engines, machines, things of metal and oil. I was wrong. When I caught Leo in my garage, I thought I was defending my property from a threat. But the real threat wasn't the boy with the wrench. It was my own calcified heart that had forgotten what it was like to need help. The true value of a tool isn't in the steel it's made from, but in the hands that hold it and the purpose it serves. In Leo's trembling hands, my bearing puller wasn't just a piece of metal. It was an instrument of love, desperation, and survival. Leo comes over every Saturday now. We're almost done with the Mustang's engine. He's a natural mechanic. He still uses my tools, but he doesn't have to break in to get them anymore. He has his own key to the garage door.